In a small city in Ontario, the afternoon sky was starting to burn amber over Peterborough. The streets were busy with high school students heading home, the drive-through line at Tim Hortons spilling onto the road, and the sound of commuter traffic picking up on George Street. Amidst that bustle, a young woman named Rachel walked quickly, clutching a worn backpack to her chest. Her high school hoodie was faded, and her black sneakers were covered in dust. Rachel wasn't just any girl. Though her life was modest, she was known in her neighborhood as smart, polite, and brave enough to speak up when she saw an injustice. Her father, Simon, an Uber driver, had just been in a minor accident, hit by the luxury SUV of a drunk businessman. Ironically, the businessman refused to take responsibility, and instead used his connections at the local police service to twist the facts. Now, it was Rachel's father who was accused of causing the accident. It had been a week since Simon was detained at the Peterborough police station. Rachel went back and forth to the station with letters, evidence, and witness contacts. But all her efforts were met with polite dismissals or were flat out ignored. Until that day, she was summoned by a detective named Carr, known for his arrogance and for helping things along. A shakedown. Rachel stood in front of a long wooden desk in a stuffy office. The smell of stale coffee and damp paperwork made her nauseous. Detective Carr. A paunchy man with a hard face stared at her from across the desk. "You're Rachel? Simon's kid?" "Yes, sir." "You want your dad out, right?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yeah, well, it's easy. Everything can be managed as long as you understand how adults get things done. Just get me $2,000. The whole thing goes away. Your dad's home tomorrow." Rachel fell silent. $2,000 might be small to some, but for her family, it was a massive figure. She only had $100 left in savings from her part-time job at a downtown cafe. "Sir, we don't have that kind of money," she said quietly. "So find it. You want to wait until your dad grows old in a cell. Don't you feel sorry for him?" Carr raised his voice. "Cops are human too, kid. Everything has a cost." Rachel bit her lip. Her heart was torn between anger and sadness. But in the midst of the pressure, she held Carr's gaze calmly. "If I pay you, sir, that means I'm participating in a bribe. You know that's wrong." Detective Carr snorted. "You think you're so righteous, eh? The world doesn't run on textbooks, kid. The guy with the money wins. That's just how it is." Rachel took a deep breath. "If you really believe that, sir, that's on you. But I'm not paying a single dollar." She stood up, gave a polite nod, and walked out with a steady stride. Carr's voice echoed behind her. "You're going to regret this. You idealistic little brat." Outside, the afternoon air felt cooler, but Rachel's chest was still hot. She walked toward their rented townhouse in a neighborhood near the industrial park. When she arrived, her mother, Sarah, greeted her with swollen eyes. "How did it go, Rach? What did the police say?" "They want money, Mom," Rachel answered flatly. "How much?" $2,000. Sarah was silent. Her hand trembled as she held a spatula. "We don't have anything left, Rach. The car was already repossessed, and our savings are gone from the hospital bills." Rachel moved closer, hugging her mother gently. "It's okay, Mom. We're not paying them a cent. I'll find another way." That night, after a simple meal of pasta, Rachel sat in front of her old laptop. She opened social media and began to write at length about her father's case. Complete with photos of the bruises on Simon's legs, the chronology of the incident, and the name of the officer who had demanded the money. She didn't write with emotion, but with facts and honesty. She posted it on X, Twitter, and TikTok, the two platforms with the most traction in her city. If the real world won't listen, maybe the online world will, she thought. The next morning, something she never expected happened. When she opened her phone, notifications flooded in. Hundreds of comments and thousands of people had shared her post. Some were angry, some were sympathetic, and some offered legal help. One private message came from an account named the Community Justice Clinic. They wrote, "We've read your story, Rachel. We are willing to help pro bono. Please send us any documents and evidence you have." Rachel's tears fell without her realizing it. She couldn't believe her decision to refuse the bribe and fight the injustice was starting to bear fruit. But on the other hand, the viral news also reached Detective Carr. He was furious when his name and face began circulating on social media. In his office, he slammed his phone down and shouted in anger, "That little nobody thinks she can fight me. She has no idea who I am." Carr immediately called 2 of his officers and ordered them to handle the problem. "If you have to, get those posts taken down. Don't let her stir up trouble." But the social media tide couldn't be stopped. Local reporters began showing up at the police station. They asked about the alleged extortion of an Uber driver's family. The atmosphere in the station suddenly became tense. That afternoon, Rachel received a call from an unknown number. "Hello, is this Rachel Reynolds?" "Yes, it is. We're from the OIPRD, Office of the Independent Police Review Director. We'd like to talk about the report you posted online." Rachel's heart beat fast. She didn't know if this was good news or a trap. But she chose to trust it. She agreed to come to the OIPRD office the next day with a representative from the clinic. That night, she prayed for a long time. She realized the fight had only just begun. And even though she was still scared, she felt something in her heart. A kind of conviction that the truth, sooner or later, would find its way. And she headed to the provincial office with the advocate from the Community Justice Clinic, a young man named Adam. He wore a gray blazer and carried a briefcase full of all the evidence Rachel had collected: hospital records, photos of her father's injuries, and an audio recording of the conversation at the police station, which she had secretly recorded on her phone. Inside the city bus they were taking, Rachel gripped her phone tightly. Her fingers trembled slightly. Adam turned to her with a calm smile. "You've been incredibly brave, Rachel. Not many people would dare to stand up to an officer like that." "I just want my dad to be free, Adam." "Nothing more," Rachel replied quietly. "And that's enough." Sometimes, big changes start from a simple intention. Rachel nodded slowly. She never imagined that she, an ordinary high school student, would now be the center of media attention. Her face had already appeared on several online news sites with the headline, "Peterborough Teen Fights Corrupt Cop." Arriving at the OIPRD office, the atmosphere was tense. Several reporters stood outside holding cameras and microphones. Rachel briefly looked down, embarrassed, as one of them called her name. "Ms. Reynolds, is it true you reported Detective Carr? Did the police really ask for a $2,000 bribe?" Adam quickly interjected, "We can't provide a statement at this time. Not until after the interview." Inside the review office, a senior investigator named Inspector Nolan greeted them with a calm tone. "Please sit down, Rachel. We've read your report. Now tell us the chronology from the beginning." Rachel explained everything honestly. From her father's accident to the demand for $2,000. She also handed over the audio recording, which clearly captured Detective Carr's voice saying, "Get me $2,000, and the whole thing goes away." Inspector Nolan listened in silence for a long time. His face was serious, but his eyes showed sympathy. "All right, this is strong evidence. We will follow up on this, but you need to be prepared, Rachel. Sometimes, after a report like this, pressure can come from many directions." Rachel just nodded. "I'm ready, sir. As long as I'm holding on to the truth, I won't be afraid." That evening, when Rachel returned home, the atmosphere in her neighborhood had changed. Some neighbors looked at her with a mix of awe and concern. Some whispered, others offered quiet praise. But some also warned her, "Rachel, be careful, The police have friends everywhere," said Mrs. Davies, their next-door neighbor. "I know, ma'am. I will be." Inside the house, her mother looked anxious. "Someone came by earlier, Ratch." "Who?" "I don't know. He was asking about you. Said he just wanted to talk, but I didn't like the way he looked." Rachel fell silent. She knew the threat Inspector Nolan had warned her about was starting to feel real. That night, she made sure all the doors were locked and the porch light stayed on. But she couldn't completely banish the fear. The next day, the story exploded. The audio recording she had given to the OIPRD was leaked to the media. Within hours, the hashtag Justice for Simon was trending on X across Canada. Many citizens began writing about similar experiences of misconduct by officials. On the other side, Detective Carr was even more furious. He felt humiliated in front of the entire city. In his office, he yelled in front of his colleagues, "Because of that stupid kid, my career could be ruined. I'm not going to stay quiet." That night, two men in an unmarked car were seen watching Rachel's house from a distance. They parked under a street light, pretending to smoke. Rachel saw them from the window, and her heart began to race. She called Adam, her voice low. "Adam, I think there's someone watching the house. Don't panic. Close the curtains. Don't go outside. I'll contact a friend on the force who can be trusted." Within an hour, two uniformed officers, not from Carr's division, arrived and parked conspicuously in front of the house. Rachel's mother hugged her daughter tightly. "Oh my God, Ratch. It's come to this. Making us scared in our own home." Rachel just smiled faintly. "It's okay, Mom. If we back down now, they win." 2 days later, the OIPRD officially summoned Detective Carr for a formal interview. He arrived with a cold expression, trying to look calm. But reporters already filled the lobby. He kept his head down, refusing to speak. But the news cycle kept spinning, and public opinion grew sharper. Several civil liberties groups began to speak out. Even a local MPP, member of provincial parliament, called for the chief of police to intervene directly. At school, Rachel's friends looked at her with admiration. Her guidance counselor, Ms. Tremblay, called her in to offer support. "You're amazing, Rachel. Don't be afraid. You're reminding us all that integrity still has a place." But not everyone was on her side. One male teacher, Mr. Harris, known to be chummy with the police, warned her, "You're still a kid. Don't play with fire, especially with people in uniform. The world isn't as simple as right and wrong." Rachel answered politely. "Maybe so, sir. But if we all stay silent, the world will never change." Meanwhile, at the detention center, her father began to hear news about his daughter's fight. One of the guards whispered to him, "Hey, Simon. Your kid is all over the news. They say she reported the cop who pinched you." Simon could only shed silent tears. "My God. My daughter is that strong." The following days were exhausting. Rachel had to go back and forth to the legal clinic, attend media interviews, and still keep up with school. The pressure came not just from the outside, but also from the fear within herself. Sometimes, late at night, she would cry quietly, afraid that her small act of defiance would end up endangering her family. One night, she stared at a photo of her father on her desk. "I promise, Dad. I won't back down until this is over." A few weeks later, the initial decision came out. The OIPRD found Detective Carr guilty of gross misconduct and extortion. He was immediately suspended from duty. The news became a national headline. TV stations broadcast Rachel's story, the high school student who refused a bribe for her father's justice. Her neighbors held a small potluck to celebrate, but the victory wasn't complete. Her father was still not free, as the primary case file was still with the Crown Attorney's office. That night, Rachel sat on the front steps with her mother. A soft breeze blew, carrying the smell of wet pavement after the rain. "Mom, I'm scared this isn't over yet," Rachel said quietly. "You've come this far, Rach. Sometimes the right path is a lonely one, but believe me, no truth is ever wasted." Rachel looked up at the dark sky, seeing one small star twinkling between the clouds. She knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt that hope was truly real. It had been 2 weeks since Detective Carr was suspended. Rachel's name was now well known, but behind the media spotlight, the shadow of intimidation hadn't disappeared. The nights in their rented townhouse still felt tense. Sometimes they'd hear a car stop at the end of the street, idle, and then drive off. Sometimes an anonymous DM would slide into Rachel's inbox. "Stop before you regret it. You think the world cares about poor trash like you?" Rachel didn't show all of this to her mother. She just screenshotted the threats and saved them in a private folder, as additional evidence if something happened. She knew the fight for justice always came with a price. One afternoon, she was called back to the OIPRD office to provide supplementary testimony. This time, the atmosphere was different. Outside the building, 2 black sedans were parked. Several men in civilian clothes watched her with sharp gazes. Adam, the lawyer from the clinic accompanying her, whispered, "Those are Carr's buddies. Don't be afraid, just stay close to me." Rachel straightened her shoulders and walked inside. In the interview room, a new investigator reviewed the documents and additional evidence. After it was all done, Inspector Nolan looked at Rachel seriously. "Rachel, I have to be honest. There's pressure from above to wrap this case up quickly. But we can't just let it go. You need to remain careful." "I understand, sir. I just want one thing. For my father to be free, and for the person responsible to be held accountable." Inspector Nolan nodded slowly. "That's our goal, too." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Carr wasn't staying quiet. With the help of the businessman who had hit Rachel's father, he was trying to flip the situation. "If we can make that girl look like a liar, people will forget everything," he said cynically to his associate. They began spreading disinformation, that Rachel was just seeking attention, and had fabricated the story to go viral. Several anonymous accounts on social media started pushing fake posts. "The case is a hoax. Her dad was the one at fault. Rachel just wants to be a TikTok star off this drama." Within a few days, Rachel's comment sections changed. There was still support but also insults. She was devastated reading one comment, "If you're so right, why is your dad still in jail?" Rachel closed her laptop. Her eyes burned. She couldn't believe people could be so quick to accuse her without knowing what was really happening. At school, the situation also shifted. Some friends started to distance themselves, afraid of getting dragged into the trouble. Only her 2 best friends, Leah and Dylan, remained loyal. One afternoon in the cafeteria, Leah tapped her shoulder. "Rach, don't read those comments. They don't know what you're going through." "I know, but I'm just so tired, Leah. Sometimes I just want to quit." "If you quit, all your effort and your dad's suffering will be for nothing," Dylan chimed in. Rachel smiled weakly. "You know what? I used to just want a quiet life. Now it feels like I'm an enemy to so many people." "Honest people are often alone, at first," Leah replied. "But they'll come around." A few days later, something worse happened. When Rachel got home from school, she found the front door ajar. Inside, everything was a mess. Clothes were thrown about, dishes were broken, and the television was knocked onto the floor. Her mother was crying in the corner of the living room. They came in, Ratch. 2 men. They said they were just looking for something, but I was too scared to fight back. Rachel immediately hugged her mother. Her chest was a mix of fear and rage. She knew this wasn't a random burglary. This was a warning. That night, she and her mother stayed temporarily at the home of a volunteer from the legal clinic. Adam came by with news. We've reported it to the police. But it's likely they won't act quickly because the perpetrators could be connected. So how long do we have to hide? Rachel asked. Until Carr's disciplinary hearing begins. After that, everything will be out in the open. The days passed with the same tension. Rachel tried to keep going to school, though her mind often drifted. At the safe house, she often woke up in the middle of the night from nightmares. But every time the fear crept in, she remembered her father's face behind bars. That was enough to make her strong again. Until one afternoon, the news they were waiting for arrived. The formal disciplinary hearing for Detective Carr was officially scheduled. The media went into a frenzy again. Reporters came to the legal clinic for interviews. However, Rachel declined to appear on camera. I don't want to be famous. I just want justice, she said simply. In the police tribunal room, the atmosphere was tense. Rachel was present with Adam and several investigators from the OIPRD. On the other side, Carr sat with a flat expression, flanked by his lawyer. When the audio recording was played, the room went silent. Carr's voice was perfectly clear, "Get me $2,000, and the whole thing goes away." Several officers exchanged glances. Carr just looked down, but his face was tense. After that, other witnesses from the community were called, one by one. All of them corroborated Rachel's story of intimidation. When it was Rachel's turn to testify, she spoke with a calm but firm voice. "I'm not trying to ruin anyone. I just want the person who did wrong to be punished, and the person who is innocent to be freed. If I stay silent, I'm just letting the injustice continue." Everyone in the room was silent. Even one of the adjudicators on the panel lowered his head, as if moved. After the hearing was adjourned, the decision was not announced immediately, but the media spotlight intensified. Even the chief of police himself was reportedly monitoring the case. But that night, on the way home, a black sedan followed the car Rachel and Adam were in. When they stopped at a red light, the car pulled up behind them. A man got out, knocked on Rachel's window, and said quietly, "Stop now, or your family is next." Adam immediately hit the gas and sped away. Rachel stared out the window, breathing heavily. "Adam, I'm scared. We have to report this to the OIPRD again. They can't just threaten us like this." But in her heart, Rachel was starting to waver. She was no longer thinking just about right and wrong, but about the safety of her mother, her father, and even herself. That night, she prayed for a long time on the floor of her room. "God, if I've taken a wrong step, show me the way. But if this is right, please give me the strength to see it through to the end." 2 days later, the official decision came out. Detective Carr was found guilty of extortion and gross ethical violations. He was dismissed from the police service, effective immediately. The news exploded across all media. People cheered in the comment sections. Several officials even praised Rachel's bravery. But for Rachel, the victory felt incomplete. Her father was still in jail, and the threats hadn't stopped. That same night, she received an unknown call. The voice on the other end was deep and menacing. "You think you've won, eh? The game isn't over, kid. You just poked a bear." The line went dead. Rachel held the phone with a trembling hand. For the first time, she felt her fight was only just beginning. She realized she wasn't just fighting one man, but a system that had, for so long, allowed the powerless to be crushed by the powerful. 3 weeks after the tribunal, Rachel's life was still far from calm. She had succeeded in getting Detective Carr fired, but the threats against her family hadn't stopped. Behind the scenes, the drunk businessman who had hit her father, Henry Price, a local construction magnate with deep ties to the police and the Crown Attorney's office, began to move quietly. Since Carr's case blew up, Price had been trying to ensure the original accident case didn't drag his name into it. He ordered his lawyers to manage the file, even attempting to bribe officials to ensure Simon remained the one found at fault. However, he didn't know that Rachel and the legal clinic team were preparing their final step, releasing all the evidence to the public. That morning, Rachel sat in the clinic's office with Adam and 2 investigative journalists who were interested in covering their story. On the table were thick binders containing copies of the original accident report, witness recordings, and photos of Price's SUV, which was damaged on the passenger side, proof that the SUV had swerved into Simon's lane, contradicting the falsified police report. Adam started the conversation calmly. "If we release this to the media, there's no turning back. Are you ready, Rachel?" Rachel nodded firmly. "I'm tired of hiding. Let everyone know the whole truth." That afternoon, a 15-minute video was uploaded to YouTube by a national news outlet titled, "The Peterborough Story, From a $2,000 Bribe to Corruption in the Ranks." In the video, Rachel calmly recounted the entire chronology, supported by evidence and legal statements. The video went viral immediately. Within 2 days, it had over 5 million views. Netizens flooded the comments with support and prayers. Many were moved to join the campaign, "Free Simon Reynolds." But not everyone was happy. Henry Price, watching the video in his office, slammed the remote control against his desk. "That kid is asking for it. Get our people ready. I don't want my name in the news again." Meanwhile, at the Crown Attorney's office, public pressure was mounting. Several prosecutors began to question the inconsistencies in the case file. One young Crown prosecutor, M.S. Mercer, quietly re-examined the collision data and discovered that the initial police report had been altered and that witness signatures had been forged. With this evidence, she submitted a recommendation for a review. The new chief of police, facing intense scrutiny, decided to open a subsequent internal investigation. 3 days later, Rachel's home received unexpected visitors. 2 uniformed officers came carrying an official letter. "We're here to escort Mr. Simon Reynolds. He's being released. His file has been declared invalid." Sarah immediately burst into tears of relief. Rachel ran to hug her father as he got out of the car. He looked thinner, but his eyes were still bright with spirit. "Rach, you did all this. I just continued what you taught me, Dad. Don't be afraid of powerful people when you're on the side of the truth." The atmosphere on their small street became jubilant. Neighbors who used to only whisper now came by to congratulate them. Some brought homemade lasagna, others shook Simon's hand with pride. That evening, the 6 p.m. church bells rang out softly. Rachel sat on the porch, watching the same orange sky that had witnessed the start of her journey. Now that same sky brought a sense of relief. But she knew the fight wasn't completely over. The next day, the news of Simon's release was a national headline. The title on the TV screen read, "After going viral, Peterborough driver finally freed. Proof that justice can still prevail." Even the Premier of Ontario gave a brief statement at a press conference. "We must ensure that no ordinary citizen loses access to justice because of money or status. Cases like this must be a lesson for all public servants." Hearing that, Rachel just smiled faintly. She didn't need accolades, just the peace of mind that her struggle was not in vain. But not long after, Rachel received another threatening note. This time, it was slipped under their door. The writing was short. "The game isn't over. Price doesn't forget." Rachel showed the note to Adam. He took a deep breath. We know he still has people on the ground. But this time, we're not alone. There are good cops, too. We'll face this. Sure enough, a week later, police arrested two of Price's employees who were trying to bribe a key witness. From that arrest, Henry Price's name resurfaced in the investigation. Big news shook the city again. Within 2 months, Henry Price was officially named the primary suspect in the collision case, and for obstruction of justice. He was detained pending further investigation. When that news reached Rachel, she just looked quietly at the photo of her father in the living room. Finally, it's all coming out, Dad, she whispered. Several months passed. The family's life slowly returned to normal. Simon was back driving for Uber, although he was now often asked by the community to speak at social justice discussions in local schools. Rachel herself continued her studies while becoming active in a student organization focused on social advocacy. One afternoon, she received an invitation from Trent University in Peterborough to speak at an event titled The Voice of Youth Courage. On stage, dressed simply, she spoke in front of hundreds of university students. I used to be just a high school student terrified of losing her father. But I learned one thing: fear can't save anyone. Sometimes, one honest voice can shake the strongest walls. The room was silent for a few seconds, and then erupted in long applause. That night, after the event, Rachel sat alone in the university quad. The cool air blew through her hair. Adam came over, carrying 2 warm coffees. Do you realize, Rachel? Your story has inspired so many people. I never expected it to go this far, Adam. I just wanted my dad to come home. Sometimes the smallest, most sincere intention can change everything. Rachel looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed clearer than usual. I don't know if I can keep fighting things this big. But at least I proved that ordinary people have a voice too. Adam smiled. And that voice won't be extinguished. A few months later, the final news came out. Henry Price was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison for causing the accident, driving under the influence, and manipulating the legal process. Rachel's name appeared in the news again, but this time with a tone of deep respect. In her neighborhood, people began to look at the police differently. Some of the old guard were wary, but many others were motivated to improve the institution's image. In a small interview, a young constable said, "If every citizen were as brave as Rachel, maybe this country could be a lot fairer." Rachel's days were calmer now. She helped her mother run a small online craft store, and continued to study hard for her final exams. She still received messages from people in different provinces, asking for advice, or just thanking her for giving them hope. One night, while writing in her journal, she wrote a sentence that would later be widely quoted by the media. "I was threatened and told to be silent, but it was from that silence that my courage was born. Because if we stop speaking, the guilty will forever believe they are right." She closed her book, turned off the light, and lay down with a calm smile. Outside the window, the moon hung in the sky, bright and whole, just like her heart that night. The end of the story about refusing the bribe. The girl who shocked the police service. It ended with a moral message, familiar in any culture, that courage, honesty, and the voice of